Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have wind warnings issued for parts of Scotland and northeast England, as we'll see a briefly stormier period through Friday with quite gusty winds and some heavier rain for some. High pressure will still probably dominate further southwards, so still dry and fairly mild, with today temperatures getting up into the low to mid-teens perhaps, and that continuing through the rest of this week. However, when we look at the longer range for the GFS, GM, ECMWF and the ensembles, it's looking highly likely now we see cooler, if not cold weather towards the end of the month. The next week looks to be continuing on that dry and mild trend, especially in the south, perhaps slightly cooler and more unsettled in the north, but again, nothing too out of the ordinary. But towards the end of the month, it's looking highly likely we'll see at least briefly northerly winds, so much colder air spreading in, return to frost and much colder conditions with wintry showers in the north. That looks like sort of the minimum we will see. Perhaps it could be colder than that. Those colder northerly winds could be sustained, and we could see there more widespread wintriness. But at this stage, that is very uncertain. The majority of models and ensemble members do bring in a colder air mass, but it's how intense that colder air mass will be and how sustained it will be, and that is what we've got to determine over the coming days and coming weeks. Of course, we've got the sudden stratospheric warming coming through the atmosphere. I don't think, though, that this cooler or colder end to February has actually got anything to do with the SSW yet. As I've said over the last few videos, we do have the MJO going into phases 6, 7 and then 8, and that does provide more amplification, or does correlate with more amplification in the jet stream, and that's why I think we'll be seeing cooler, colder northerly winds towards the end of the month. But how sustained it will be, as I said, we'll have to determine that nearer the time. So, of course, we'll run through the latest models, look at the GFS, GM, ECMWF and the ensembles, just to see what they are producing over the coming days and weeks. So, do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So if you do start on the live radar, you can see there's actually quite a bit of precipitation around, at least compared to what we've had recently. There is an area of precipitation moving in through parts of Western England and Wales, and it will produce heavier precipitation for a time because it is quite patchy and it is disintegrating as it moves eastwards. Again, remnants of a weather front with cooler, more unsettled weather in the north, trying to push away the more settled higher pressure further southwards, coming up against that wall of high pressure and sort of reducing in intensity. Further northwards, quite a few showers, but again, nothing too spectacular and generally still dry for the time of year. It is, though, very mild out there. Again, I'm recording this around 1:30, and look ahead of that weather front where we've got higher pressure and quite warm air masses for this time of year. Temperatures are up towards mid-teens, 14, 15 degrees being seen in some areas behind the weather fronts. Cooler, but still probably average to above average for the time of year. And yeah, really quite mild. Again, we did anticipate generally milder conditions this week, but I didn't anticipate it getting this mild. Just shows you what can happen when you get a bit of sunshine, a bit of higher pressure, and warm upper air temperatures. And you can produce pretty decent temperatures even in the middle of February. Again, we only have to go back a few years ago when we saw temperatures getting up into the high teens, if not touching 20 degrees in February. So it can be done, and today is another example where we can see generally quite decent conditions. However, it won't last. It will get swept away very quickly, and we'll be back down towards low teens, if not high single digits by the end of the week, and potentially, as I said, towards the end of the month, quite a bit colder. If you look at the weather warnings now, every Friday we do have 2 weather warnings, but they are basically the same warning, just with slightly different start and end times. If you look at the widespread wind warning for Scotland from 5 AM until 3 PM on Friday. Again, look at the further details. A deep area of low pressure is expected to impact much of northern Britain through Friday. Winds will increase from the west to east with gusts of 55 to 65 miles per hour and potentially as high as 70 to 75, and they will gradually reduce through Friday afternoon and through Friday afternoon and the evening. You can see it's high impact, low end of the likelihood scale. Again, if that does increase in likelihood, could see amber warnings issued, perhaps. But again, I wouldn't put too much weight in that. And of course, if it does stay quite intense and these likelihoods increase, you couldn't rule out it being named, but I do think that is highly unlikely given the time frame we're looking at, about 48 hours now. So I do think if it is named, it will be pretty imminently, and we're not seeing any rumblings of that at this stage. We also have that wind warning for parts of northeast England, again very similar, 50 to 60 miles per hour, maybe 70 miles per hour in a few spots, again high on the impact, low on the likelihood, but from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m, so a couple hours or longer warning there, again through northeast England down into parts of Yorkshire as well. Elsewhere it still will be quite gusty, just not as impactful, so we'll just have to see what happens, but yeah, could be a little bit stormy, as I said, through the end of this working week. So if we do now go over to the UKV and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, you can see that quite big weather front pushing in from the west earlier today, but as I said, just disintegrates as it moves eastwards, but could give some thicker cloud and some patchy rain for some. Through this evening though, more widespread precipitation, mostly falling overnight for most people, and again pretty light and patchy, but most areas will see at least a bit of a sprinkling there. It should clear by the morning for most, but we could see some lingering thick cloud and areas of drizzle, so it can actually be a little bit miserable tomorrow morning with that lingering moisture around. Through Thursday afternoon, those showers should decrease, but it will still remain fairly cloudy, and another weather front pushing into parts of Scotland there. And then through Thursday evening to Friday, you can see some real bright colours there, so very heavy rain for Scotland, and that will accompany those very gusty winds with that quite severe low pressure system skirting to our north. That weather front does try and push southwards, but it doesn't make too much progress until Friday evening into Saturday. Could get reinvigorated there. Could see a period of heavier rain for a time, again mostly overnight, and by the afternoon on Saturday it'll be pretty pleasant, but a bit more thicker clouds. So you can see later this week it is turning more unsettled, but again nothing ridiculous, no huge walls of rain, no huge deluges widely, and any heavier precipitation likely to fall mostly overnight. Beyond that into Sunday, again some heavier rain pushing in, again mostly falling overnight, maybe a bit of snow over the higher ground, full clearing, and Thursday being sort of on and off showers and thicker cloud, and then into Monday as well. Precipitation in the north, higher pressure and dry conditions in the south. If you look at those winds, you can see through the early hours of Friday picking up to around 50 to 75 miles per hour, so it could be quite gusty there, as I said, for that yellow warning. Again, if we see it named, we need to see this wind area increased in size and probably in intensity. More 70 to 80 mile per hour gusts would be needed than we're seeing here to see it be named, but you can't rule that out, so we'll just have to keep an eye on it the next 24 hours, but we'll be pretty sure on the impacts this time tomorrow. And then beyond that, wind speeds do come and go, fluctuate, sort of gusty strengths, around 30-40 miles per hour, but again, nothing too significant. If we do put on the temperatures though, it is going to be fluctuating quite a bit this week. You can see through the southeast right now it is 12 to 13 degrees. It's actually a little bit milder than that in reality, around 14 or 15, maybe even slightly higher. Further northwards and westwards, more towards average to slightly above average, around that sort of high single digits towards maybe 9 or 10 degrees. So not too much cooler, but a little bit cooler behind that weather front. Overnight tonight, temperatures won't drop really too much. Northern Scotland maybe towards freezing, but most areas mid to high single digits. And towards tomorrow afternoon, again, we see those temperatures rising again. 10 to 13 degrees, could be slightly higher in a few spots. And then as we run into Friday as well, again, a very mild day there through Friday ahead of that weather front. Once again, 12 to 14 degrees, could be even milder than that, but we have to remember there will be more cloud around, so it could feel a little bit cooler out there with that. Behind that's a little bit chillier with a cooler air mass in for Scotland, and that will spread more widely through the early hours of Saturday before getting pushed away once again by another milder wedge of air back towards 10 degrees by Saturday afternoon, and then into Sunday could be a cool morning, and then Sunday afternoon 10 to 13 degrees once again. So it does look generally on the mild side the next 5 days, regularly seeing temperatures getting in excess of 10 or so degrees in the south. Could be cooler further northwards, but again generally mild for middle of February. Really quite mild, and these are sort of spring-like conditions that we are seeing. But again, we have to hold our horses there. It will be turning colder towards the end of the month, and of course with the SSW coming through, it could mean we could see another winter month heading into March as well. So if we do now have a look at the longer range and go over to the GFS 6 o'clock run, you'll be able to see that we are in a westerly flow at the moment, high pressure in the south, low pressure in the north. You can see that little severe low moving there through on Friday, giving us those more unsettled, windy, perhaps even stormy conditions. But generally we see high pressure in the south, low pressure further northwards, and that's why it's generally drier and milder in the south, generally more unsettled and cooler in the north into early next week. But as what happens beyond that, you can see we see some ridging in the Atlantic around this time next week, and we pull in a northerly flow. Again, this is where the models sort of start to diverge, and we have different scenarios. They all pretty much get to this position where we see a cooler north to northwesterly airflow, but it's what happens beyond that. In the GFS, we generally see high pressure sat over the top of us, slightly to our north, trying to push further northwards and pull in cold air masses, but instead just keeps us in a chilly north to northeasterly flow all the way to the end of the run. Again, this wouldn't produce really any snow or anything like that. Daytime temperatures probably would be average, maybe slightly below average, but with sunshine out there under the high pressure, it would probably still feel pretty pleasant. But the big thing with this, it'd be chilly when the winds get up, and overnight those temperatures will plummet. So it would be fairly cold, it would be a cold spell, but probably no snow or anything like that with this. Again, the best way to view this is look at the potential equivalent temperatures, because the 850 HPA temperatures will be fluctuating a lot. But under high pressure, remember, we don't need all too cold upper air temperatures to get cold weather towards the surface. So you can see you've got a cold, dark blue air mass plunging here, briefly mild, but still in the blues, again indicating generally cold conditions. And then we start to see more blues potentially pushing in right in the Longrange with northern northeasterly wind, and you can see how many times through the end of this run we're poised to pull in a very cold air mass, but the high pressure never gets quite far north enough or west enough to be pulling in those winds with very cold air staying in Scandinavia or Central and Eastern Europe. So GFS poised to go very cold and potentially snowy, but on this pattern that we're seeing here, it would be cold but nothing too exceptional. Overnight frosts, quite a cold wind chill, but generally dry and probably quite sunny weather as well. Again, we'll have to see, as slight fluctuations in this could change the conditions a lot, but as I said, we will have to see and compare it to the other runs. If we look at the GEM, see how that does compare. Again, we see a westerly flow at the moment, high pressure in the south, low pressure in the north, and then as we head into the middle of next week, we see that amplification in the jet stream, and we see a north and northwesterly flow arrive, and by day 10, a big mid-Atlantic ridge again, probably because of that MGO going into phase 6, 7 and 8. And then again, a northeasterly flow, cold air drifting in, but nothing hugely cold. The -5 isosphere moving in, again, would be the risk of a few wintry showers, but generally would just be dry, cold and frosty. Again though, we need to see this big high pressure system about 1,000 miles further northwards to be seeing anything significantly cold. Again, that could happen. Some Ensemble members do have it happening, but here it's probably a 3 or 4 day cold spell before that high pressure topples and generally brings us milder conditions. Could it re-amplify further northwards into early March and then start to give us properly cold conditions? That is very possible, but from the looks of this, it will be a cold end to the month, nothing ridiculous, and probably not particularly wintry in terms of any snowfall at all. The nearest we'll get to any white stuff on the ground will probably be frost and maybe the odd wintry shower in Scotland or down the east coast from this sort of pattern. If we look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare. Again, a westerly flow at the moment, high pressure in the south, low pressure in the north, and right towards day 10, we do see brief northerly winds there, but no huge amplification in the jet stream. Bit of a pesky low there towards Iceland, stopping the high pressure getting further northwards, and we get into cooler air masses, but not as much of a direct northerly, and probably a bit more of an unsettled northerly to northwesterly flow there. But still getting the -5 isotherm in, still overnight frost, still perhaps colder, more wintry showers around as well, but nothing too exceptional. Again, that blocking would need to be a couple thousand miles further northwards to be seeing anything majorly cold in this sort of pattern. Again, it's at day 10, or day 7 to day 10, this sort of pattern, so things can change, but at the moment it's looking like a bit of a northerly wind, perhaps as brief as a northerly toppler, or perhaps a bit more sustained colder weather, like the GFS was showing. But once again, I must stress, nothing hugely cold, and I don't think at this stage this is linked to the southern stratospheric warming. So if you think this is a sort of southern stratospheric warming block, I highly doubt it. The SSW doesn't look likely to impact us until the end of the month, if not early March, and at this stage we're looking at sort of the 25th of March. So this is the time frame where the SSW would perhaps just start to impact us, not by this time next week. So I must stress that this is most likely from the MJO transitioning phases instead of any blocking from the SSW. If we do finish by looking at the ensembles, you can see from the latest GFS it is mild the next week or so, but in around 7-8 days time, plunging well below average by a couple of degrees, down towards the -5 region for about 2 or 3 days. That's where the majority of ensemble members get to, the GFS operational run gets to. But then we see a split around the 25th to the 27th. Some return us to average, to above average, some average to slightly below average, and some keep us quite cold, down towards the -5 to -10 region. And that's where we'll have to just see what happens. You know, the operational run there's generally in the middle, where it keeps us cool, but nothing ridiculously cold. Under high pressure would be chilly. Again, most of the ensemble members don't have huge precipitation spikes, so I suggest it'll probably be more on the cooler, drier side, but of course we will have to see. But from the looks of this, it's a cooler, perhaps even colder end to the month, but nothing too spectacular. Again, if we were going to see anything close to the beast from the east, which I know has been peddled around, we need to see -10 to -15, if not slightly lower from the most severe point. So we're a good 5 degrees away from the majority, 5 to 10 degrees away from the majority of ensemble members. So no ridiculously cold Siberian air mass. Yes, perhaps an Arctic air mass for a time, but nothing too ridiculous at this stage. And from the looks of the operational runs, there's no really bitterly cold air remotely close to us to give us anything like the beast from the east. So I don't think that's possible at all within the foreseeable time frame. Again, can't rule out for something into March, but I don't think we'll see anything remotely like that for the rest of February. But as I said, chilly to end the month, if not quite cold. Again, look at the dew points, so you can see freezing to below freezing in the longer term compared to around 5 to 10 degrees now, just showing you it's going to be a lot colder air mass, and the 2 meter temperatures dropping down to the mid, maybe even low single digits, and sea level pressure, generally higher pressure for London, again indicating dry and potentially cold. We do finish by just looking at the ECMWF ensemble members for the midnight run. You can see once again the next week is generally average to above average, before we do plunge to average to slightly below average, not quite as cool from the compared to the GFS operation ensemble members, sorry, but there are more milder runs here, but the majority, I say, would get down to the -5 area. But once again, we've got that split around the 25th, some staying cold and sustained cold, others return to average, if not above average. So it doesn't look likely it will turn colder for a time towards the end of the month, but how much it lasts, and whether it lasts right to the end of the month into early March, we'll have to see. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Make sure you enjoy the generally pretty mild conditions we do have over the next few days, and the next 5 days in general, and perhaps even as long as the next week. It will be rainy at times, there will be gusty winds like on Friday in the north, but it will generally be pretty pleasant out there, and it won't be too hard to dodge the rain. There may be thick cloud around as well, which is a little bit unfortunate. These sort of temperatures with sunshine would feel really quite spring-like, so we'll have to see exactly how that does develop. You know, cloud can break at very short notice, so we'll have to see, but it does look likely it will turn chillier, if not colder, towards the end of the month. And again, with the SSW coming through the atmosphere, pretty much occurring in the stratosphere right now, then March could be a different story to what February has been so far. So I wouldn't write winter off as of yet, but for the next week, enjoy the pretty spring-like conditions. So anyway, as I said, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.